Have you ever looked up at the sky, seen a couple of planes, and wondered, how do we keep all of that from being total chaos? Well, today, it's all about radar and fancy radio chatter, but it wasn't always that way. It all started somewhere much, much simpler. So let's dive into the pretty amazing, high-stakes story of how we first learned to talk to airplanes.
Really think about that for a second. How do you tell a pilot where to go without a radio? It seems like a simple question, but it was, without a doubt, the single biggest challenge for early aviation. Imagine you're the pilot, trying to land, with other planes buzzing around, and you have no way to talk to anyone on the ground. For a little while, they used flags, kind of like on an aircraft carrier. But as airports got busier, that just wasn't going to cut it. They needed something better, and fast.
So the first big leap forward wasn't sound, but light. In a really clever move to get a handle on all the chaos happening on the airfield, controllers moved on from waving flags and embraced a brand new piece of tech.
And this was it, the light gun. Seriously, just think of it as a super-powered, highly focused flashlight. For the very first time, a controller could actually pick out one specific plane, aim, and send it a direct visual command. It was a game changer.
And this is where you can see the very beginnings of the modern control tower we know today. These light guns had an actual gun sight, for aiming, and lenses you could swap out to change the color of the beam. This meant controllers could finally get out of the weather and move into these glassed-in rooms on top of hangars. From there, they had this perfect commanding view of the entire airport. A huge, huge step up.
Okay, so they had the tool, but a tool is useless if you don't know how to use it, right? How did they use beams of light to say something complex like, hey you're cleared for takeoff, or, more importantly, don't land here, it's not safe? Well, they developed a language.
And you know what? The code itself wasn't super complicated. It was pretty simple, actually, but it was absolutely vital for keeping people safe. This was the first standardized system that let one person on the ground manage a bunch of different planes in a way that everyone could understand. This new language of light, it brought the first real sense of order to the skies.
And here's basically how it worked. It was brilliant. So, if you're a pilot on the ground and you see a steady green light aimed at you, you're cleared for takeoff. If you're in the air and see that same light, you're cleared to land. A flashing red light, though, that was serious. On the ground, it meant get off that runway now. In the air, it was a dire warning. The airport is unsafe. Whatever you do, do not land. It was this really elegant, simple language of color and pattern.
But here's the kicker, the really wild part. This piece of tech from the 1930s, it is not just some relic in a museum. No way. If a modern jetliner loses its radio communications today, or the tower system goes down, controllers will literally go to a cabinet, pull out a light gun, and start signaling. The code is barely changed, and every single pilot flying today is still trained on how to read these signals.
So the light gun sounds pretty smart, right? And it was. But for all its ingenuity, it had some deep, fundamental flaws. It was a fantastic solution as long as it was a perfectly clear, sunny day. And we all know, flying doesn't always happen on sunny days.
And the problems were pretty major. First off, a little bit of fog, heavy rain, even a dust storm, and that light beam was completely useless, totally invisible. Second, a pilot is busy. They're flying the plane, and they could easily be looking somewhere else and just miss the signal. But the third and biggest problem, the controller had no way of knowing if the pilot ever even saw the signal. It was basically a one-way shout into the void, hoping someone was listening.
And this quote just sums up the danger perfectly. Think about it. A controller could flash a red light telling a pilot to stop, but they had absolutely no way of knowing if the pilot saw it or if they were able to comply. You could give all the instructions in the world, but you could never get a question back, never get a confirmation, never get a warning from the pilot. It was clear something had to change. The answer, of course, was radio. The ability to not just signal, but to actually speak to pilots, to have a conversation, that was going to change everything. And this revolution? It had a very specific birthplace.
Right here, Cleveland Airport in Ohio. This is where it all started. They built what was basically a shack on top of a hangar, and for the first time ever, they put both radio transmitters and receivers in it. Just like that, the modern system of air traffic control was born.
And the arrival of radio didn't just change the game. It created a whole new one. Look at this. Communication instantly went from one-way to two-way. Range jumped from just as far as you could see to about 15 miles out. It worked day or night, rain or shine, and maybe most importantly, a pilot could say, "Roger, got it." The controller finally knew they were being heard. But you know how it goes with new technology. It's almost never a perfect fix right out of the box. This brand new, revolutionary system of talking to planes, well, it introduced a whole new kind of chaos that nobody really saw coming.
First, you had the hardware problems. These early radios were heavy, clunky, and notoriously unreliable. Not to mention, they were incredibly expensive. The airlines actually hated them because they took up space where a paying passenger could be sitting. And most small private planes, their electrical systems just weren't powerful enough to run one.
And then there was the human problem, which honestly might have been even messier. There were no rules. Zero. No standard way to talk on the radio. Pilots weren't even legally required to call the tower. So you'd have one guy calling in from 10 miles away, another one wouldn't say a word until he was about to touch down. It was a free-for-all. And without a common language, instructions were misunderstood all the time.
And yet, for all of that chaos, all the technical glitches and human error, it was still a massive improvement. Despite all those limitations, the system actually worked remarkably well. For the first time, controllers and pilots could have a real back-and-forth conversation, sharing vital information that made flying dramatically safer than it had ever been.
So they had finally found their voice. That dangerous one-way street of the light gun had become a two-way conversation. But that just brought up the next great question in aviation safety. Now that everyone was talking, how on earth do you create a system to make sure everyone is speaking the same language? And more importantly, that everyone understands?